All right, welcome back to this Ocean Life podcast. Thanks for being here, everybody. Always good to have you, and always appreciate your support and listening to the fun stuff we're trying to put together here. I'm excited. It's summertime. It's early June, and that means there's a lot of all kinds of fun stuff happening, including the upcoming Molokai to Oahu, unofficial World Championships of paddleboarding. And there's an event near and dear to my heart and a lot of my friends. And we are continuing to crank out some neat stories. Everybody, whether you're the world's best or just a first timer starting out on that event, everybody has tons of trials and tribulations. And it's really fun to share. And today we've got Steve Shlens. We had him on the podcast. I think he was the third person ever. Thank you, Steve, for doing that, being an early victim. And now he's back. Steve's not only done a bunch of Catalina crossings here in California and other races, but has done Molokai to Oahu 7 different times. And so today what we do is Steve takes us through all this and shares stories from his first time in the Kaiwi Channel and the hard learning curve everyone faces around travel, logistics, and paddling in the race. We hear about Steve being lost in the channel for 3+ hours when his escort boat was unable to locate him during the madness, water world craziness of the start, as well as some great perspective on the mental challenges the race delivers and some of Steve's tactics and experience for overcoming those. Steve relates stories of sinking boats, fixing large holes in his paddleboard before the race, working with boat captains, and the overall amazing camaraderie of this really, very special event. So, whether you've done Molokai to Oahu before or are considering doing it for the first time, a lot of great stories and perspective from Steve to enjoy. So, again, thanks for being here, you all. Keep minimizing the plastic. More and more reports are coming out that we're having a real hard time in the water, in the ocean with the plastics, the big stuff and the small stuff. So let's all mellow out on it. Let's get out in the water, enjoy some summertime fun. And now let's get into the Molokai to Oahu stories with Steve Shlens. So Steve, man, you've done Molokai to Oahu 7 times from basically 2010 until, today, and we'll get to today. So you got a pretty neat perspective of both solo and team, activities over almost a decade, man.
Yeah, I've been pretty fortunate. I started doing Molokai back like 1 year after I started really racing competitively. I knew I had to do it, and to be very honest, I was super scared about the race.
Really?
Everything you hear about how gnarly it is, this, that, and the other. And I was not a downwinder. I'm still not a downwind specialist kind of guy, but I knew I wanted to do it. I saw that there was a team division, so I dove right in and grabbed a fellow paddler here, and so yeah, 2010 was my first year, and I've had a great time doing it.
Yeah, and each year it's funny, it doesn't really matter who you talk to, who's done the event once or 10 times. Each year has its own set of challenges, whether it's the conditions are different or the logistics change, or it's like there's so many variables that everybody will say, and so this year, so 2010, you sent me a few little bullets on this, and it sounded like that was a very much a learning year for you in terms of, you thought it was a downwind race. So and then as well as your logistics, showing up at night, et cetera. So take us for that first year, especially for folks listening who maybe haven't done the event and are thinking about it. There's so many lessons I think to be learned from hearing other people's experiences.
Oh, yeah. 2010 was definitely a huge learning experience for me. The logistics of Molokai, Keone Watson had said, if you're on your board at the starting line, you've already won. It's just so hard getting there. I mean, from figuring out that first time where to stay on Molokai, where to stay on Oahu, your flight to Molokai, your flight to Oahu, your boat from Molokai to Oahu, how to get your boat there, how to get your board there, how to figure out how to do your nutrition when you're there. I mean, every single thing. It is a challenge of logistics. That first year, I jumped into it with a good friend, Nick Bobroff, here in Santa Barbara, and I thought as we were training for this, I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. We're going to do 32 miles dead downwind. There is nothing better. And I like your laughter at that because you quickly learn this is not a downwind race. This is a quartering side chop race.
Yeah.
And so you got to know how to ride the bump and how to downwind, but you also have to know how to catch the bump, side chop, and then turn in it and ride that stuff. So that first year we contacted the race people to get a boat, and LJ Benson, one of the race directors, he's got this list of people who have boats. So he gave me the name of a guy and a phone number, and I called the guy up, and it's one of these just classic Howley things. I mean, I called the guy up and he picks up the phone. He's all, "Who dis? Hello? Who dis?" I'm like, hello? Who dis? I realized he's asking who is calling. So the guy's name was Charlie, and he was really not happy with me calling him. And so he said, "You call me back later." So, okay, I will. And so I called back later, and once again, he picks up the phone. "Who dis?" I'm like, "Oh, hi, I'm Steve. I'm calling from California about doing this race." And he's like, "Okay, well, you get on my boat. You respect my men on your boat. You respect my boat. You do this. You show up with cash in your hand. I don't want no checks."
Oh, geez.
And so Nick and I had a little talk, and we thought, well, okay, we got a boat lined up, but let's kind of ask around, see if maybe there's another boat. And I don't know the guy who was supposed to be doing our boat, this Charlie guy. Maybe he was having a bad day, a bad week, whatever. But we ended up putting out some feelers, and a buddy of ours, Keith, knew a guy in Waimanalo who had a boat. And so we called up this other guy in Waimanalo. His name was Keela, and contacted Keela. And he was just absolutely down for it. He's like, I got 4 different boats. We can go in this tiny one, or we can go in the big one with the lap of luxury. It's going to be really cool guy. And so we're like, fantastic. It was Keith Malloy who just totally set us up with this guy, which is fantastic. So we went over there, and the guy said, well, let's meet in Waimanalo, and we're going to have a barbecue on, like, I think it was Wednesday night. So come on out and you can meet us and we can figure it all out. So Nick and I rent a minivan. So here we are, these 2 Howley guys from California in a minivan driving into Waimanalo at night. Now, Waimanalo, for those who don't know, is a very local place.
Yeah, it's very rural.
And so here Nick and I show up at like 8 o'clock at night, or 9 o'clock at night. And there's this full-on barbecue going on. There's tons of guys out drinking. We get out of the minivan, and I don't really drink all that much. And as we show up, Nick, before we get out of the van, looks at me. He's all, "If anyone offers you a drink, you say yes." So get out of the car. We open the door, get out, and there's just a bunch of local guys everywhere, and we hear somebody yell, "Hey, Cali boys!" All right, we're in the right place. And we get out, and up walks this just huge local guy, big smile, super cool, holding 3 beers. And he's like, "You want a beer?" I'm like, "Hell yes, I do."
You're not going to say no.
No, I'm not. So that 1 beer basically lit me up. Nick had to do the driving for the rest of the night. But that was our introduction to Keela. Fantastic guy. And Keela, his real name is Kilauea, and his brother Mana was going on the boat with me, which, by the way, is short for Makea. These guys are legit Hawaiian. They're awesome. So they were fantastic. We met them the next morning with our board. We put the board on the boat, and then they were to meet us over there. So we hopped our flight over to Molokai on Thursday. It turns out that that's actually going super early to Molokai. Most people show up on Sunday. Didn't know this.
Yep.
So we were there with like 3 other people total this first time. So it was Mick DeBetta, Pete Sterling, us, and then Jordy Mercer showed up like about a day later. But that was it. Nobody was there.
Yeah,
and it was a ghost town.
Huh.
God, when first time you go to that beach, Kaluakoi on Molokai, and you see it like with nobody there, it looks like a ghost town.
Yeah, it is, man. It's like something out of like a zombie apocalypse movie. We were like, whoa, where is everybody? Because some of it's a little dilapidated, some of it's very beautiful. I mean, it's all very beautiful, but that was my impression too. And I think I should know this. I think it was 2010. I stayed with Mick and Pete. I don't think you and I knew each other, probably crossed paths, maybe even met, but I remember being there early also, and it was just absolutely freaking dead quiet.
Yeah, it was crazy. I bet we did meet that year. Um, we're both like, "Who are you?" So it was so great being there. But God, what a crazy place! So Kaluakoi is I think the history here, from what I heard, was that the Molokai Ranch owned that whole the company that owned Molokai Ranch owned that whole property, and then they were going to build a huge hotel out on the point, and the people in Molokai said, we don't want a huge hotel.
Yeah.
So the Molokai Ranch people said, you don't want a hotel? Okay, fine, we're out of here. And just there's this beautiful golf course there. They just turned off all the water and walked away. And so that's why there's all those buildings there, and there's that golf course that's being reclaimed by nature, which is kind of cool.
Yep.
But it's also super eerie when you're walking through there. And then that first year, it was super late at night, and we're inside one of those rooms where above us, I think it had been condemned, but our room was okay. And I heard this loud chirping noise at like 2 a.m. I thought, what is that? And I look out the window, and there's a bunch of antelope or deer. I mean, it's crazy. It was like such an experience. And then there's wild turkey everywhere.
Yeah.
But eventually, everybody showed up, and the next morning, and everybody showed up, and then the race was on. But
yeah. So talk about that. I mean,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, just getting to that point is such a challenge, because you've got all these different logistics that you're trying to figure out, and you don't know what things cost. And half the time you feel like you just show up with a checkbook and you look at somebody and say, how much should I write it for?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a crazy experience. I'm sorry to be babbling here. I guess let's talk about the race, huh?
No, it's all good, man. And that's part of the tale. I mean, the race there's a paddling aspect. There's like actually hands in the water aspect, which is, you'll call that 6-ish hours, give or take. But then there's like a week or weeks, or even like leading up to it, like days, 6 days of just like preparing and getting there. You know, it's funny. There's like the actual, what you actually do physically is so small compared to the larger picture, which is what you're painting, which is really fun. It's part of the story as well. But then, so talk about now, you got 2 guys from Santa Barbara who are first timers in this event. You've done Catalina, you've done other events. So you're like, you know how to paddle long distance, but your expectations are a little bit out of whack. You're thinking this is going to be a downwinder, and you hit the water. And then take us through that then, when you guys realize, whoa, this is not just a downwinder. This is something different.
Yeah, it was, what you just said, by the way, I'm just going to go back for just a sec, is so accurate about how it's not about this 6-hour plus or minus race. And by the way, some years was significantly plus to that.
Yeah.
But it's really about that whole process leading up to it. And the race itself, as you said, it's just such a minor part in all of that preparation to get there and do it. So to go back to the race then. So that year, Nick and I had talked, and the decision was made that I would start. The boats are to stay away for I think it's 30 minutes. So
Yeah.
So being newbies to the race and being newbies to doing a relay, we were like, oh yeah, let's just switch every half hour, which quickly learned, I mean, extremely quickly, that you don't do that. You switch every 15 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. And then if it's really bad, you go down to 5 minutes. So I did the first half hour, Nick did the second half hour. And in that half hour of sitting on the boat, I didn't get to the point of throwing up seasick, but you learn that the best place to be during this race is not on the boat.
Yeah, it's so true.
You're bobbing around at 5 to 6 miles per hour for hours. You're like, nah, I don't want to do that. I'd rather be in the water paddling. So we quickly learned that it took about 8 minutes to fully recover from like a 10-minute segment. And then the last 2 minutes, I started getting a little seasick. We hop on the board and life is good again. So we did 10 minutes for the majority of it.
Oh, cool.
And the reality of, hey, we're not going dead downwind really filled in after about hour 1, because that first hour you're sort of getting out of the lee of Molokai. You're getting into the real deep water of the Kaiwi Channel, which is a beast unto itself. I mean, you don't realize, if you've never done it, what you're really getting into. There are so many different races, and it's one of these things that I love talking about. I don't know that anybody else really likes to hear it, but there's really 3 different distinct aspects to this race. There's the first third, the middle third, and the last third. And it's really not thirds. It's more like the first quarter, the middle half, and the last quarter. But that first quarter is sort of that sprint race of getting into the wind. And that middle half is controlling yourself in the wind. And that last quarter is dealing with what Morgan calls the pit of despair, China wall, and the finish. And it's when you get into that middle half where you start realizing this is not what I thought it would be. And there's big water. It's moving fast. You can't see any other boats. That was, I'm so used to the Catalina experience and all the others where you see all these paddlers around you, you see all the boats around you, you get a bearing. There, you could be in the trough between 2 waves and you don't even see your own boat. And,
yeah.
I mean,
that's
mind
pretty
you,
cool.
in 2017, my boat didn't even find me for a while, so it's easy to get lost out there. And so before the race, Nick and I were practicing handoffs and how to do the relay exchanges. We watched a bunch of videos on YouTube and things like that, and just tried to figure some stuff out. And so about 2 weeks before the race, we had a real windy day up here in Santa Barbara. We thought, perfect, let's go do this. And we're out there paddling, and this tuna boat passes us, and we're doing a downwinder in heavy wind. And maybe 1 minute after this tuna boat passes us, I look over at Nick and he yells. And Nick's not a very excitable guy, but he yells and lifts his arms. And right then I see a shark just charge, hit his rail, turns and hits his rail, and goes back away. I'd never seen anything like that. And I've never seen anything like that to this day, where a shark charged, hit the guy, didn't bite, but hit the rail and then turned and went away.
Yeah.
And I looked at him and I just went, "You want to go in?" And he goes, "No." I was freaking out and he was fine. So we finished our paddle, and I mentioned this only because it's going to lead into what happened during the race. So then that was 2 weeks before the race. Then about 1 week, maybe a little bit before the race, it was a beautiful sunny day, and Nick and I are out paddling in Carp over by Carpinteria Reef, and things are mellow, and we're talking, and suddenly out of the blue, there's this loud screaming noise as a seal has jumped out of the water right next to him and yelled, and then dove back into the water. It was basically charging.
Wow.
Just like, oh my God. So then suddenly the whole discussion between Nick and I was that Nick just attracted all the wildlife.
Yeah. Something about that board, man. The critters don't like too much.
Oh yeah. So then we're during the race. So now flash forward to during the race, and I'm on the boat. Nick's on his board. There's big heavy seas, and he's coming towards me, and I look and I see behind him a pod of dolphins coming, and I just think, oh, that's beautiful. And so I grab his camera, and I'm standing there on the back of the boat holding his camera as these dolphins are approaching Nick, and I just thought, this is going to be fantastic. What a neat picture. And as he's coming down a wave, the dolphins come underneath him.
Oh, wow.
And Nick sees the dolphins, but he didn't see them coming from behind. So he looks down, and he's told me about this. His take on it was, oh my God, there's these big gray things underneath me.
Oh yeah. It's a pot of sharks.
So he looks up and he points down on his board while paddling, points down.
No.
I hold up the camera and go, yeah, I know. So it was about a second or two later that they came up and he realized I'm surrounded by dolphins. So all was good. But
that's incredible.
Just some experiences. And
yeah.
The experiences of that race go on and on from that to at a certain point the boat was getting knocked around and I'm going to go grab my bag, and I open up the panels to the V-berth to look in, and it's completely filled with water.
Yeah.
The boat was sinking during the race, and we didn't know it. And so they were bailing out water during the race while we're racing from that front V-berth. And Nick said he had the same experience. I didn't say anything to him. He said he looked into the V-berth, saw it, closed the doors again, and didn't say anything to me either. Like we both were just keeping it a secret from each other.
Yeah. You didn't want to distract. Yeah. That's it. I mean, it's like you talk about the travel to get there, logistics to get there. You're on the water paddling. And then there's also like the boat factor. And like, we've had Nick Franco on, his boat was sinking when he was taking it across, and the Coast Guard had to drop a water pump to them. I mean, I remember my first year is, I think 2010, looking back, was for some dumb reason, the first time you don't really know what's going on. I was going to take my boat across too because I wanted to see the water. So we're leaving at 5 a.m. and it's like my guy and like three other locals bringing boards over. We're all hanging out, and all of a sudden we're about to go. And this one guy looks at his boat, and it's like there's dual motors, and there's a shaft in between, basically like a connector shaft between the two motors. So it's steering, and the thing was snapped. It had rusted and snapped. And this guy, they're like looking at it, and I'm all antsy to go. I'm like, let's go. And then, dude, I mean, so what they do, they take the gaff, the fish gaff, cut it. No, it was the broom. It was like the mop for the boat. Cut it to length, fit it between the motors, and these guys roll into the channel with a frickin' broom handle as the steering shaft. But it's just like, it's like the people get beat, you get beat in the water, the boats get beat, and it's just like if you make it back to the finish line all together in one piece, again, you've won. Just getting to the finish line, you win, and if you get to the start line, you win, and the finish line is the same thing. It's just stories are never ending.
Yeah, it's the easiest part of the race is actually doing the race.
Yeah, that's right.
It's race, by the way.
It's true. So then you and Nick, you do 2010. It's learning, a lot of great stuff. You come back 2012, 2013. I'm sorry. You come back again with another guy, Dan, and you guys as the relay team, and you win 2 years in a row. Question there, and then I want to flip over to when you started doing it solo. But when you came back in 2012, who were you with? And it was Dan. Who that is? Tell us a little bit. But also like how you adjusted your game plan in the water, actually racing, logistics aside, actually in the water, what your guys' game plan was to do so well and basically win your division in the relay.
Sure. Dan Van Dyke is a paddler down in San Diego, and in 2011, I took the year off after getting my butt kicked by the Kaiwi Channel in 2010. And so in 2012, I wanted to do the race, but Nick off, he just wasn't able to do it that year. And I thought, nah, I don't want to do it solo. I guess I'll be out. And then about 2 weeks, it was literally 2 weeks before the race, Dan Van Dyke from San Diego called me and said, hey, my partner can't make it. Can you do this? And I said, are you kidding me? So you got a boat already? Yes. You have a place to stay already? Yes. You've got all the logistics done already? Yeah, we do. I'm like, I'm in. So that part of the equation was just made simple for me that year. It was fantastic. Yep. And then during the race, so Dan and I knew each other. We didn't know each other well before 2012. We paddled a few times, but we weren't real close. And so, I mean, him being in San Diego, logistically, we just couldn't even be close. So when we did the race beforehand, we talked about it, and the decision was made to do 15-minute for the first hour or two, and then go to 10-minute almost immediately, just exchanges, and then to actually go down to 5 minutes if necessary by the end of the race. And so we really had a lot of discussions about how are we going to do this, who's going to do what, and how it's all going to work out. And Dan's a fantastic paddler, so I was really lucky to be hooked up with him, and we were able to win. We didn't win all the relays; we won our division, but it went it went extremely well, and we just had a lot of fun. And I think also the fact that we both had, I don't know about Dan to me, but I had a little bit of respect for the guy. So
Yeah.
with what I think was mutual respect, we both were careful about, hey, how do you feel? What do you want to do? And that sort of thing. So it made it a really good experience. As I said, we logistically, we stuck to the rum line,
Yep.
which is, I think, 9 times out of 10, your best way to go in a race like this. What I heard from about Jamie Mitchell was basically his discussion of every year he stuck to the rum line.
Just straight across.
Just straight across. So if that rum line means basically point A to point B in exact straight line, and if you can stay on that, fantastic. You got to be strong, and you got to have endurance to do it. If you're in a relay, it's a whole lot easier. If you're solo, you gotta really know how to control yourself and the ocean. But why paddle 34, 35 miles when you can paddle 32?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And Jamie obviously brought that out to the point of artistry with his paddling. So Dan and I took a note from that book and stuck to the rum line. We had a real good driver who kept us on point. And that's so key with your boat, is to have somebody who is not afraid to communicate with you and tell you, hey, look, you're going too high, or you're going too low, or you're right on the line, stay on this line. If they aren't communicating with you and you aren't communicating with them, you're in the dark. And you may think you're going in the right direction, but you could be way off. I mean, again, that's my story in 2017 eventually, which was just, that was last year I did it solo and just said, I'm not in this thing. So that was my third time. And I thought, good enough. I don't have anything left to prove. I'm not going to do this solo again on a stock board. I may do it future sometime on an unlimited, but right now, from that race in 2017, I really got humbled in a big way. Which, that channel is going to do to everybody, but it really gave me a good slapping, which I apparently needed.
Yeah, no, it's true.
So,
it's very true, man. And it's interesting. There's kind of two pieces to that. What you just chatted about. One is there's a learning curve. There's like 50 different learning curves when you do Molokai for the first year. But one of those is typically when you're new to the game, you get what you get from your boat support, meaning you're not going to get the cream of the crop boat guys, the guys who know the channel, who do like the outrigger guy, who know that channel super well. They understand the currents and tides and what it's doing and could put you on the right line. You're going to get somebody who's maybe a strong boat guy. He might be from the other side of the island, and he, maybe hasn't done the channel 2 times or 20 times. And one thing's important is to get some information from those around you, on Molokai beforehand, and really try to figure out and pick your line, and then make sure it's hard because there's so many things to figure out, not just paddling, that your boat guy's going to stick to it, right? Because again, and I've had this myself where a legit boat guy's a great fisherman, water guy, but hasn't done the channel much, and he was like, no, we got to go up, we got to go up more towards Hanama Bay. No, you got to hit that, and blah blah blah. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, like you said, Steve, it's a 32-mile race, and we ended up paddling 34 because you do this little arc, and you think you're going to get in this current and kind of swoop in, and sometimes that happens. But so that that's one major learning curve, But then tell us, that 2017 year, you're doing it solo. You come back, and you were just on fire in general with paddling and super strong in many events, but you got disconnected from your boat, and it took 3 hours for them to find you? And that
that was pretty tough one. So the first time I did it solo was 2015, and 2015 was super flat year recently, where there was a hurricane coming up from the south, and it just shut off the trades. And so I hadn't really trained all that much. I knew it was my first solo effort, but I wasn't taking it real seriously. My thought was, hey, look, I'm going to have a boat next to me. All I need to do is just go arm over arm. I don't care how I finish, and I just want to get through it. And I got super lucky. Keone Watson, he for business reasons couldn't make it at the last second. He was super bummed. But his boat guy, Jim Beaton, who is just a legend, became available. And
cool.
so Keone and Jim just hooked me up. So I had Jim Beaton as my boatman, who, just as you just said, is probably one of the best guys at getting across that channel. He's escorted the best paddlers. He's escorted the best outrigger guys. He's escorted the best surf skis. He's escorted the best outrigger teams. I mean, he had it down. And that was also, I know I'm going back here, but that was also the first year that my wife came with. And at the time, we were still dating. I told her beforehand, I say, look, you're going to be on the boat. It's going to be gnarly. There's going to be big seas. You might get seasick. I don't know. You want to do this? And she goes, no, I'll go. And it was that flat, beautiful year. And Jim's on the boat, and he's fantastic. And she was like, God, this is great. This is the best race I've ever been to. This is really beautiful.
I don't know what you're so scared about, Steve. This is so nice out here.
Exactly. It's like, God, this Molokai race is really a pleasure. And so I did the race. I ended up, I didn't train, as I said, nearly enough. Before the race, everyone started realizing, oh, crap, this is going to be a flat year. And I had Darren Mercer and Mike Takahashi come up to me both separately and just say, hey, look, this is a year you could win. Because they both know I'm not a downwind specialist, but I'm a flat water guy. Right. But they both said, hey, this is your race. I wish I had trained then. So I ended up coming in seventh overall, which was great. Obviously, I didn't win, but I had a good time. But second to in my division to Ludo Dulo, and Ludo is this French guy who's just an absolute stud.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I always want to beat Ludo, and I have once or twice, but boy, he got me that year. But I thought, hey, great, I'm going to do this again. And so, coming into the finish, we had that huge swell. I was racing Tom and Nick Carroll. Tom and I are both Tom's on the board as we're coming around the wall, and we both start paddling for a bomb.
Oh.
And he is just to my right by like 2 feet. And the wind's, as you know, when you're coming in, the wind's blowing in your face, and we're both just scratching. And he barely gets over the ledge as I get blown out the back and just catches this bomb all the way through. I look up, and he's like 300 yards in front of me. I said,
no way.
It was awesome, though. He and I talked a little bit about that afterwards because he took off. I mean, it's amazing what happens when you get a good wave.
Yeah.
So they came back the next year, and it was a real year of Molokai. And my wife saw the boat, and she realized, oh no, this sucks. Being on the boat is not a good thing. So I really did train that year. I got second again to Ludo, which, hey, I was okay with, but I still want to try to beat him. So I came back in 2017, and this year I got a board made special for the race. I've been training my butt off. I'm thinking this is going to be it. And before the race starts, they give you those little GPS trackers, and you give them to your boat, and they keep them on the boat, and that way people can follow you online. So I picked mine up, put it in my pocket, and thought, when I see Kilo, I'm going to give it to him. And I saw him that morning. Never saw him.
Oh, wow.
In 2017, like a lot of stuff went wrong. As I said, I got a board made special for the race. And when it was shipped over, the front of it just got crushed.
Oh, no.
Shows up at the race, and it's got like a 1 foot by 1 foot just bashing inside of it, just through the whole deck. Oh, God. So Buzzy Kerbox had a bunch of silicone paste, and I just filled the thing up, cover it with stickers, and it held actually, but it was, they made the front of that board weigh about 2 pounds more.
Yeah.
And then the room that I was staying in, the people who I had Airbnb'd from canceled at the last second, so that got screwed up. Like all sorts of stuff was going wrong. Keela was going to escort me, as I said, but then I couldn't meet him before the race, so we're supposed to meet there at the start. We never met at the start. So I had my GPS tracker in my pocket, and we took off for the race, and there's big seas, and it's kind of gnarly, and suddenly I'm alone, and I'm racing in this race, and there's no one around, and I've got one bottle, and half hour in, I'm kind of starting to sip on it. And 1 hour in, I'm done with that bottle.
Oh,
and I'm looking around and I don't see anybody. And I thought, that's all right. It's all right. He's going to come up. And so I keep racing and thinking, okay, he's going to find me. He's going to find me. And now I'm not really seeing many boats at this point. Now I'm like 2 hours in. And the reality of what's going on hits me. And I say, okay, I can see Oahu. I got to get myself there. And I'm on a paddleboard. I'm in shape. I've trained. I don't have any water, any nutrition with me, but that's okay. I just take my time and get there. And so in my head, it was like, okay, race is off. But now I just want to get across. And so I start paddling mellow, and about 2.5 hours, I see another boat, and I wave at them, and they come on by, and I say, hey, can you hail my boat, please? So they hail the boat, and they contact the race committee, and then they take off with their paddler, and then I'm alone again. And it was about another half hour before anyone came up again. And I heard this rumbling behind me. I'm at the 3-hour mark of the race. And mind you, by the way, at the 3-hour mark on my GPS, which is on my board, I'm at 15 miles or 16 miles. Excuse me. At 2.5 hours, I was at 16 miles. So at 3 hours, I'm at like 18.5 miles. Yeah. And I'm thinking, hey, I might beat 6 hours. I could still kick ass in this thing.
Yeah.
Like, I got a shot. And I'd been depleted, but I still felt great. And I heard this rumbling behind me, and it's a race committee. They had received the hail. They couldn't find me. And so then they were looking at the GPS trackers, and they're like, well, there's Steve's boat, but where's Steve? And then they realized that's not Steve's boat. This GPS tracking thing we have isn't Steve's boat. And so they come up, and there I am. And they said, we found you because you had that beeper in your pocket, because I never found my boat. I ended up with this beeper in my pocket. That's how they found me. So they gave me water, which was wonderful. But as a paddler, I think, at that point, you're so nutritionally depleted.
You need calories.
It's like drinking emptiness. So, I drink this water, and I'm like, I still need something. And my boat came up about a half hour later. So it was about 3.5 hours in where I get my first nutrition. And what I should have done, quite frankly, is just stop, take a whole bunch of nutrition in, and then just and go in that, again, way of, hey, survival. But instead, I'm like, well, I'm kicking ass. I gotta keep going. And so I did not realize how depleted I was. And it's that last quarter of the race when you hit that, again, Morgan calls it the pit of despair. It's the shelf just off of Oahu, where the water starts getting super jumbled. You're off of Hanauma Bay. It's not easy. At that point is when the reality of my trip hit me. And by the way, on the way to Hanauma Bay, my boat comes back up to me, and the guy says, do you know where you're going? And I said, well, yeah, right there. And he's like, well, you're headed towards Waimanalo. So I ended up doing just short of 37 miles that year.
Yeah.
I hit the pit of despair. I was averaging about 2 to 2.5 miles per hour. Where I thought I was going to beat 6 hours, it actually took me, I think, a little over 7.5 hours. And I was just destroyed.
Oh, man. So talk about that. I mean, that pit of despair, it's not just that race, it's any race. And you've done things like Catalina and other long distance races, which, you tend to, at times, these long events, get into a place where you're not feeling well, your mind gets a little bit, off kilter. Whether you're going 2.5, knots, or you're just not feeling well. So what do you, Steve, as somebody who's been competitive paddling for a long time and done many long events and probably hit that pit of despair, mentally in many different times, I'm guessing, maybe not, but how do you deal with that? What's your kind of technique or tactic for, like, when your mind goes south or gets sour, what do you do?
Yeah, it's for everybody, I suppose it's a little bit different. But early on, I heard Mick DeBetta talking about seeing himself in a race, and he saw some video of himself. And it was about 5 hours in the Molokai race, and so he's approaching the finish. He's at that place near China Wall where life gets a little bit rough. And he said he was watching, and he saw that his stroke was really poor. that it wasn't as strong as it should have been. And he said, I don't know who the interview was with. I really don't remember, but I recall him saying, and I knew that despite how I didn't look like I was paddling optimally, everybody else was in the same place or worse.
Yeah.
And that's sort of how I deal with it, is this mikta beta.
There's some comfort in that. Yeah.
Of knowing I'm not alone. Everyone else is hurting. So now is the time more than ever to really turn it on and to start getting there. Now in 2017, turning it on was not really an option for me anymore. I was so depleted. It was just about finishing and surviving. But in other years, it really was about, this is where, and I've done it in Catalina. I've done it in the Rock to Rock, which is a channel crossing race. I've done it here at Molokai and other places where when you're tired, you know that your competitor is, so turn it on. And that's where you really gotta, even if your form is not optimal, you gotta turn it on and fight through that at that point, physically, mentally, emotionally. And I talk about and I joke about sometimes getting through the wall is a matter of having ignorance and caffeine.
Yeah, that's right. Definitely some caffeine does not hurt at all. A little injection of energy is always a good thing.
Exactly.
So after having done that course, Steve, for, a good 7 times, and what you described earlier was there's kind of these thirds. The first kind of start, the third, and the middle chunk, and then sort of the last third where you hit China Wall and the shelf and everything. And I know they're different. And because when you encounter each of those areas, you're in a different place, both mentally and physically. The first third, you're active, alert, you're just going middle of the way, you're still feeling good. And towards the end, there's challenges there. But what would you say is like physically the conditions, let's just say, the most challenging, and take into account the beginning, that first third where it's water world, man. There's like 100 paddlers, there's 100 boats. It's freaking crazy. It's all chopped up. Which part of those thirds would you call the most physically demanding of the whole race?
So that's a great question, because they're all so completely different.
Yeah,
and you're feeling so great at the start, but as you said, it's water world. Yeah. There are boat wakes galore knocking around. There are boards everywhere. There's people everywhere. And it's those boat wakes that make it really crazy, but the more wind there is, the nicer it is. And you're feeling good, but it's not easy paddling. Right. And that middle part where you're a little bit spent, but now you're in the heart of the race. And you're trying to control your circumstances and the board and catching bumps and riding bumps properly and linking them and connecting them. And that's an absolute blast when done correctly. And when not done correctly, that can be a living hell. So those are each a distinctive part. But for me, that last part where you're depleted, but now you've got to really tap into your reserves and mentally say to yourself, okay, this is where I need to focus and do everything right. That to me is the toughest part. Yeah. But it's also the most rewarding part because you're fighting through a section where your speeds are going to come down. But as I said earlier, that's where I subscribe to the mikta beta school of, okay, now go harder. Yeah. I've passed a lot of people in that section where they're hurting. Right. And it's also visually just stunning. I love that because the water there is so crystal clear and beautifully blue. The colors of blue that you see during that portion are amazing. And then you get yourself next to China Wall, and suddenly you've got these big swells coming up and hitting the wall and coming back. And the fastest place in that section, typically, not always, but typically, is right against that wall. And so people will look at me as I'm paddling that section and think, you're a lunatic, because I'm 5 feet away from the wall, good wave, and I could get crushed, but it just doesn't happen that way. Yeah. You keep yourself mentally on board and physically moving.
Yeah, that's my
And
favorite stretch there too. And because I don't know, for some reason, like you're in the beginning of the race, you're distracted by the boats, the people, and the fact that you're like, I have all these hours ahead of me. You're excited. In the middle of the race, you're just like kind of slogging-ish, and then towards the end, for me anyway, it's like, while it's challenging because the currents get really weird there, you turn the corner at Portlock Point and that wind hits your face. While that's physically challenging, the conditions there actually kind of wake you up a little bit, because like you said, it's like there's this big cliff, and yeah, it's really beautiful for sure, but like you can get right against that thing, man. I mean, having paddled that before, you feel it. You're like, I can be like almost arm's distance from this freaking giant cliff and be going way faster than if I was like 30, 40 feet out there, and then you turn the corner and you got to look for waves. You got to kind of pick your way through the reef. And what's nice about that is now it's kind of a little bit more tactical. You're kind of looking who's around me. Can I catch that bump? Can I not? How do I, slither around the wind and stuff? And so it's kind of a nice treat of sorts, depending how you see that race at the end, where, hey, here's some new things for your mind to think about and to kind of distract from. You might not be feeling so great. But I don't know, that last part, I think for me is my favorite.
I agree. I love coming around Portlock Point, and catching a wave can be so tide dependent. In 2018 is the last year when I did it with Morgan, came around the point and just hugged that wall. And as I'm coming around, I passed 3 teams because I was just literally against that wall. And then we were a co-ed team. These were 2-man teams. So I was able to pass 3 teams coming around the wall and then catch a wave. And God, it's just the best feeling. And as you said, it's mentally, you got to be there and you got to be in the moment and watching. And it's so tide dependent. If it's a low tide, you don't want to be, when you catch a wave, you don't want to be super inside. I've made that mistake too. I've made all the,
that's right.
Life is about learning from your mistakes. And in 2013, I rode right over the reef, broke the fin out of the board, and we kept paddling.
Oh yeah, so just, I know. I remember coming in my first year, and because a friend of mine lives right there in Waikato, and I was there with him for a week, and so I paddled that stretch, man. I paddled around out past Portlock to China Wall, almost to Hama Bay. Like I did like 5 or 6 times, because I knew, that's all you could really test. You're not going to paddle out in the middle of the channel and come back in. And I knew at the end of the race, I'd be taxed. I wanted to understand, hey, what little advantages can I get? So I knew that stretch. I kind of watched the tides, and I knew where to be, because I'd paddled it like 5, 6 times. And end of the race, I was like excited, because I'm like, dude, I'm so close. I knew I was there. I'd made it almost. And I had this little line I'd picked out previously, just practicing around Portlock Point, and then picking through the reefs. And there was a water safety guy at patrol. He's like, dude, he was basically like pushing me away from the inside wall, that spot you mentioned. And I was like, no, man. He's probably looking at me like, who's this Hallie, dude? You're going to wreck your board. And he was basically, you're out of this area, get in the middle of the channel. And I was like, no, because then you're in that wind. There's no bump out there because you're in the channel. And I was like, oh, so I had to slog through it, and I was like, no, man, I know. Come on, let me go through. He's like, no, get out there. So, but, like it's probably safer in the end, but it's nice to
been there, done that.
Yeah, man. So then after all this time, Steve, and, it's solo and in the relay and everything, like, and I know this is an open-ended long question, but if there's like 2 pieces of advice, somebody's listening to this and goes, you know what, that's on my bucket list, I'm doing that. What would, if you could give one piece of advice for logistics, again, this is a hard question because there's so many, and one piece of advice for like on the water, real-time racing, like what would those 2 things be?
Okay. So, wow.
I know,
both of them involve.
I can't pick one myself.
Yeah, you threw me a serious fastball right down the inside. Let me see if I can even hit this with the bat. So first off, my thought is go in with an open heart and mind throughout. Respect what you're getting into. Know that it's super serious. Also know that if you got a boat lined up, worst case scenario, there is no shame in getting on that boat. I know people who have gotten super sick in the channel. And so my piece of advice for the channel is actually not about the paddling, because look, if you're doing this race, it means you qualified and you know how to paddle. They're not going to let somebody in this race if they don't have the skill to paddle themselves across. So really what it comes down to, in my opinion, is nutrition, and have your nutrition dialed. It is really hot in Hawaii, which means that while in California, on a typical long distance race, I'm going to go through a bottle with some electrolyte and some calories in it. If I'm going to go through that bottle of like 20 to 24 ounces in 45 minutes to an hour, in Hawaii, I'm going to go through that bottle in like a hand. So if you put the same nutrition in your every single bottle that you do here, in 1 hour, you will have doubled the amount of nutrition that you took in, the amount of calories and everything else. Yeah. In 2 hours, you'll have quadrupled it. So don't do that. What I would suggest is that you do 1 bottle of water and then 1 bottle of nutrition. 1 bottle of water, 1 bottle. Because what I've seen is a lot of people become, really doesn't kick in until about the 3-hour mark, where you hear about people getting seasick when they do this race, or getting sick to their stomach or other problems. And it's usually around the 3-hour mark. And what it is that they've doubled up on nutrition and didn't realize it. And it's so to me, that's the piece of advice that I would give, because I think that most people who are in this race, they already know how to paddle, they already know how to do it. So really focus on getting yourself there safely as far as nutrition goes. If you're feeling sick to your stomach, don't take in any more nutrition. Have some electrolytes and water. And when I say electrolytes, I mean like electrolyte pills that have no calories. Just a bunch of electrolytes. And if you get too many electrolytes, so what? You're going to pee them out. It's okay. Yeah. But if you don't have enough, if you don't have enough water, you're really going to hurt yourself. And if you overdo your nutrition, I mean, there's nothing worse than paddling on a bloated stomach. Right. And I think a lot of people, that happen to them and don't realize it. I think it's actually pretty common. Yeah. Good point. That's my silly piece of advice as far as doing the paddle. As far as the logistics go, the thing that makes life the nicest is sharing. And so what I would say is try to plan stuff with friends. I mean, you can't, if you're doing it solo, obviously you can't share a boat, but you can share a place to stay. You can do flights together. You can ship your boards together. You can do paddles before and after together. Don't do this alone if you can avoid it. Doing this alone is really, really hard. Yeah, that's a great point. So what I would say is just, find somebody else or a lot of other people who are doing it and do the stuff together, because it's, number one, it's great for camaraderie. Number two, it's great mentally. And number three is that you're getting assistance throughout, that you don't have to constantly have all the answers, because you're not. You're just not going to have all the answers. And even the people who do this race regularly, who live in Hawaii, this race, even for those people, is a logistical nightmare. I mean, Catalina is a tough race logistically. This race is, in my opinion, about 4 times as hard as Catalina logistically. Yeah. No, that's all good perspective and input, man. I appreciate that, Steve. And that's one of the things is I'm hoping if people listen to this, there's some veterans who've done it and are nodding their head and going, oh yeah. And there's new people who are like thinking, oh, whoa, that's a good point. I didn't think about that. So there's a lot of value here in sharing, man. So I just want to say thanks. I mean, there's a lot of great wisdom, I'd call it, honestly, and epic stories, man. So thanks for being back on the podcast again and talking today, man. Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure, Josh. Thank you so much for having me. I really do feel honored and privileged. And, again, this is, to me, this is something I love doing with these races, and Molokai is I think world renowned as the race to do and to experience. And so, got to go in with a humble heart and I try to, as I said, in 2017, the race really taught me a lesson, but it's going to always teach everybody a lesson. It's not,
Yeah.
it's not easy. And if it was easy, everyone would do it. So it's awesome to those people that are doing it. I just always tip my hat and say, congratulations and good for you. It is not easy. And people shouldn't feel compelled to do it either. There's also that aspect of it.
Yeah. Good
People
point.
feel compelled that, no, you don't have to do it to be a complete human or complete paddler.
Yeah.
Just have fun with paddling. And if you're not going to have fun doing this, you probably shouldn't.
Yep.
You probably shouldn't be doing this race if it's not going to be fun. This is about having fun. And I came back to that spot last year with Morgan and just had a blast. So I love doing this. And again, thank you for having me on. I'm
absolutely, man. 100%. Cool, Steve. Well, hey, thanks again, man.
Thank you.
Hey there. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast today. We really appreciate all the support. If you like what you heard, please, hype us up on social media. Always appreciate, spreading the word. Give us a nice little rating on the your podcast app, and just keep tuning in. If you're interested in being on the show and sharing some of your life stories, hit me up, josh@thisoceanlife.tv. You can PM me on Facebook or Instagram. Anyway, thanks again for being here, and have a great day.